A very good morning, team. It's Fabio and welcome back to another daily market update where we discuss all the major dollar pairs and, of course, the potential trade opportunities alongside the fundamentals. Now, EURUSD has been pushing further in towards the downside, and yes, it has caused a daily fractal break. So, first of all, what is a daily fractal break and how could we potentially capitalize on this opportunity? So, first of all, we all understand that EURUSD has made an overextended leg in towards the upside and is now providing us with an ascending correction, which is potentially signaling that EURUSD wants to head down lower. Now, when we look for a potential reversal in the market, there are always two things that we need. First of all, we need an overall area of liquidity or supply. Now, in this example here, we had a supply zone, but we didn't really see any reaction to it, and we ended up grabbing the liquidity above this overall internal swing high over here. Now, after grabbing that swing high, you need a second thing, and that is a change of character, also known as a market structure shift. Now, what I look at personally are the individual candlesticks, and here we had a high break. Here once again we had a high break, and what we've now seen here is a low break. So this for myself now indicates to me that there is a structural shift within the market with a push in towards the downside and that low break, signaling that we are now here with an area of supply. So these two imbalance candles, which I also mentioned in yesterday's video, are now your area of supply from where we are potentially looking for further downside. Now, EURUSD didn't really provide us with a very strong candle close yesterday. I would have preferred to see a strong candle close like somewhere over here with the body closure being there, and then for example a pullback, because that to me would have signaled a lot more bearish momentum. Now this could also just be like a liquidity grab. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to wait for the lower time frame confirmation. So what I want to see at this point in time is one more potential sweep in towards the highs, a tap in towards this overall buy before the sell, grab of that internal liquidity, and then I'll look at the 1 hour time frame to see the 1 hour change of character for that confirmation entry. So what would that look like? Well, that would look like this, where we get, for example, another push up, we break this structural high over here, this for example becomes your structural low, then we see one more push down, one more push up, this becomes your structural low, and then you wait for that structural low to go. You form an area of supply here on the 1 hour inside of that 4 hour and inside of that daily supply zone, and then you'll have a potential short on your hands. Okay, so this is the potential EURUSD short that I'm eyeing up. And this for me will be a hedge position against NZDUSD and AUDUSD, which I'm going to be discussing with you guys in a second. But that further downside correction on EURUSD does seem to be coming very, very soon. And those shorts do remain valid as long as this high over here remains respected and as long as that holds. So if you are getting into a short position, you preferably would want to kind of like eye up a stop loss above that strong high over there and look for a deeper correction. Overall, I'm not favoring like a massive correction just yet on EURUSD. Like I wouldn't hold this all the way back down into like 104 whatsoever. This would more be like a 1 to 2 position if you would take it with a wider stop loss, something like that. Okay, so going into the dollar index next, we can see that the dollar index overall is still at an area of resistance. I'm going to clean up my chart and keep it nice and simple for you guys, because at this point in time we are still in kind of like an uncertain region. Yes, we had a liquidity low over here, an internal liquidity low, right? So this is like a little bump in the road on your way up, and under these bumps in the road, that's where liquidity lies and where we could see a potential reversal from. Now, what I'm seeing here on the daily is that it's still consolidating. It's not like really providing us with any clear market direction. Overall, I'm just waiting for that area of consolidation to break out, which should happen in the near future. However, what I want you guys to understand is that because it's consolidating after like an overextended push down, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see a push all the way back up and then, for example, a continuation in towards the downside. Very often you'll just see like this strong push down, right? So this overall impulse in towards the downside, then you just see like a sideways correction, and this is then enough for the pullback to then facilitate the next move down. What I would like to see for that to happen is like, for example, a fake out on this kind of like highest high of the overall range, fake out, and then for example a shift in the structure, so like a 4 hour market structure shift, and then I'll look for shorts on the dollar. Otherwise, just follow the overall current order flow up higher, because for now we can see that the sell before the buys are being respected. So what do I mean with the sell before the buys? Very simply said, that the demand zones are still in control, right? So here we have a demand zone in control, here again we have a demand zone in control, and now once again we're kind of like forming a demand zone over here. So let's say today we see another push up, right? We see like a candle close above this high, then just follow that overall order flow up higher, follow the demand chain up higher. But the ideal short for the dollar would be a liquidity grab, kind of like above the range high, and then we see what, like a structural shift, and those demand zones then become supply zones, okay? And then you could look or start looking for a shorting opportunity. And how that would look like would, for example, let's say be what could it be? It could be like, this is kind of like a similar example where this is kind of like the range high over here. Then you see like, okay, let's say we have demand, then again we have demand, and then again we had like a very small demand zone, and then boom, what shifts after this break of this low, and then this becomes your supply, this becomes your supply, this becomes your supply, and then from there we push that lower. So I'm looking for something similar now on the dollar over here, just to compare with what that looked like in the past, where if we go back into this region of price over here back in, for example, 2020, you can very clearly see that you have like that overextended leg down, then you just have like an area of consolidation where you pretty much just sweep kind of like the high over here, and then once sweeping that high, then the downside continuation happens again. And very similar again over here, where you see an overextended leg in towards the downside, you see a sideways correction as we're having over here. Then what happens, you kind of like liquidate the high of that range with this fake out, and then from there you start pushing in towards the downside. And then the ideal opportunity to get into a short is after this break of structure over here, where you then pretty much have like the entire buy before the sell acting as your supply zone, right? So this buy before the sell down, and then you look for shorting opportunities in there for that further short. So I'm looking for something like that on the dollar to happen. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm waiting for on the dollar. That's why I'm not going to be too aggressive with those EURUSD sells. Going into AUDUSD next, AUDUSD is looking pretty good. I'm eyeing up this long position, which I have here open on my screen. Overall, the weekly fractal structure is still bullish, keeping it nice and simple once again for you guys. You guys know that we are at a higher time frame area of support over here. So looking for AU to rebound in towards the upside. At this point in time, we're still inside weekly demand. So if we just zoom in on the individual candlesticks, this for me is my weekly demand zone, and this here is my weekly fractal low, and this here is my weekly fractal high. Now we can see that the market is pretty much just rebounding into the 0.5 fib or into the 0.5 fib region. Could push a little bit lower, but overall I'm just looking still for upside continuation from AU. It's getting obviously some downside pressure due to the dollar strength that we've currently been seeing, or the dollar consolidation. Also there were numbers on unemployment, I think it was in Australia, that came out yesterday, that caused also some additional pressure on the Australian dollar. However, the RBA, so the Central Bank of Australia, was very fast to comment that interest rates are not gonna likely drop, and that is bullish for the Australian dollar. So that's why I'm still interested in getting into some further long positions. Also, if I look at the opens, we have the monthly and the yearly open still here, so I would like to kind of like place my stop loss underneath it and just look for the next leg up here on AU. Overall, we are also inside daily demand over here, with this being your daily fractal low, this being your daily fractal high. It could just grab liquidity, guys, and then reverse, for example, but this is a nice opportunity to start looking for those potential further upside longs once again. If you want some more, let's say, higher probability setup, then, for example, just wait for a sweep of the low or of these lows, and then just wait for the 4 hour to shift. Again, form a demand zone, and that is also potentially set up that I'm kind of like looking and eyeing up with a nice and wide stop loss, and to swing that back up higher. So still very interested in AUDUSD longs. We're currently at a key level of support as well, so that's currently what I have my eyes open for, also as a hedge against that EURUSD short position. Going into GBPUSD, we can see that GU is pushing down lower today. Overall, we're still inside this daily demand zone. I do think that we are going to break that pretty soon. I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a break of that daily fractal low. If the daily fractal low breaks, then I'll be interested in a deeper correction before, again, some further upside. Remember, next week on the 26th, we have budget decisions in the United Kingdom, and that could be interesting. We are currently, eyeing pretty much that up for now. I'm not very interested in long-term GBPUSD sells, but I will be keeping an eye open if we do break that daily fractal low. For now, obviously, what we're seeing is kind of like the ascending correction, and we now have supply zone over here. Now, again, it's supply zone over here. So the buy before the sells, those are currently in control, and I would say just follow those down lower, and they do become higher probability sells once we break that daily fractal low. And then I'll start, following that 4 hour trend and getting, for example, into a short position on like these supply zones that we have now over here. So waiting for that daily fractal to break, and then these kind of shorts become valid for myself. At the moment, they're a little bit too aggressive as we're currently still inside daily demand, sell before the buy, with the daily fractal structure being bullish. So I'm waiting for the daily fractal structure, so this low over here, to break, and then this becomes your supply, and then you could look for shorts in there, and then you just need to wait for the 4-hour alignment. So that's what I'm looking for on GU. Going into NZDUSD, we can see that NU is also looking good for further upside, just like AU. So it's kind of like EURUSD and GBPUSD shorts, AUDUSD and NZDUSD buys. So NU here is inside daily demand, as we've been mentioning. Yes, so looking pretty much for a rebound up higher on this. Looking at the 4-hour time frame at the moment, I'm looking for a shift in the overall order flow. I would actually like one more push back down lower once again, because for now we can see that we have supply in control. We have supply in control. Then again, we have now supply over here, which is still open. And what I would be looking for is maybe a push into there, one more push down, and then kind of like the order flow shift happening to then get into long position on the 4-hour demand zone, because you kind of like want that daily and the 4-hour to align. At the moment, like the immediate market structure on the 4-hour is still bearish, right? So we're seeing kind of like an internal downtrend, and you want that internal downtrend to shift into an uptrend, because then you have the highest probability longs. You could just long NZDUSD, to be very, very honest, from this current level over here, as the current daily fractal structure is bullish, obviously, with this being the low and this being the high. You're currently sitting at the 0.5 fib. So this is a perfectly fine long position to take with your stops below the lows, pretty much like this, and targeting a new high. But again, it's just about how much risk you want to take. The highest probability position will always come when the 4-hour aligns with the daily and the weekly, because now the weekly is fractal bullish. Okay, so that's what you need to understand first. This is the weekly fractal break. So that now means that here, this is your high, and that this is your weekly fractal low over here. So we're now in a bullish range on the weekly. On the daily time frame, you are bullish as well. And then if you look at the 4-hour time frame, you are now currently also like swing bullish, obviously. But the internal trend is still bearish. So the highest probability setup will always come when the internal trend then aligns with those swing trends, okay? But yeah, if you're fine with taking like just a swing position, then you could already get into this, in my opinion. And then last of all, we have USDJPY and gold. So UJ itself has retraced into that supply zone, which I mentioned yesterday. You can see here that we are currently sitting in a supply zone. Now, if you're looking for a short opportunity on this, you can see now that we've got a 1-hour fractal structure shift over here. This for me is not very high probability, because there's no like real liquidity here to the left. So preferably I would want to kind of like really see some more momentum in towards the downside start to occur if you're looking for those short positions. This for me is not a very high probability short. A higher probability short would be if the 15-minute trend shifts. So this 15-minute demand zone, if that were to break, then I would say, okay, shorts might be interesting. For now, you can see the internal trend is still up higher. So wait for example, this low to go, and then I think higher probability UJ shorts will come. Otherwise, it could just rebound, push up higher, and start liquidating these equal highs that we have here to the left, okay? So keep that in mind for UJ. I know a lot of you love gold, so I'm just going to say this on gold. Still looking for further upside. Gold is extremely bullish. There's no sense, or it doesn't make sense to look for sells. Yes, it has now liquidated, for example, this low over here, and the current order flow is bearish, so it doesn't make sense to look for longs just yet. I would like to see another push down, a little bit of a deeper correction, and then again, what you want to wait for is for the overall order flow to shift and play out in your favor, because for now supply is in control, and longs therefore do not make sense. So that's what I'm waiting for. Wish you all a fantastic trading day, and speak to you inside Discord, and thanks for watching.